The richest woman in the city sat across from me in a hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning, gripping a paper cup of cold coffee she never drank, and begged a single dad in scrubs to marry her so a judge wouldn't take her little boy away. She had it all planned out, the way people like her plan everything. A marriage on paper, a stable home to show the court, a signed agreement that the moment the custody hearing was over and her son was safe, I would quietly disappear and she would pay me more money than I'd make in 20 years of night shifts. It was a transaction. She said that word herself. A transaction. She thought she knew exactly how it would end. Both of us walking away. Her with her son, me with a check, no harm done. What neither of us knew, sitting in that empty cafeteria while the machines hummed down the hall, was that on the morning of the custody hearing, with everything won and the exit all arranged, this woman, who had called our marriage a transaction, would stand outside that courtroom and be completely unable to let go of my hand. But before I tell you about that morning, do me one quick favor. If you have ever been the person people only notice when they need something from you, hit that subscribe button right now. This whole channel is built for the ones who turn out to be irreplaceable. Go on, I'll wait. Now let me back all the way up, because to understand why a billionaire begged a night shift nurse to marry her, you first have to understand a small hand holding a bigger one, a promise I made to a dying woman, and the sickest little boy on my floor. My name is Ben Carter. I am 37 years old, and I am a pediatric nurse. I work the night shift on the children's ward of a big hospital, which means I spend my nights taking care of sick kids and their terrified, exhausted parents in the hours when everything is darkest and hardest and most frightening. It is not a job that makes you rich. It is not a job most people would want. But I will tell you the truth about it. It is the most important work I can imagine doing, and I would not trade 1 hour of it. Because here is what the night shift on a children's ward teaches you, and it is the whole thing you need to understand about me. Children who are sick and scared and far from everything safe do not need you to fix them. Most of the time you can't. What they need, more than the medicine even, is one steady grown-up who is not afraid, who does not flinch, who sits with them in the dark and holds their hand and stays. That's the job under the job. Not the charts and the IV lines, the staying, being the calm in the room when everyone else is falling apart. I have learned that a frightened child can survive almost anything if just one person will stay steady beside them and not let go. That is a thing you cannot buy and cannot fake, and it is the only thing I have ever been truly good at. That, right there, is most of the story. Everything else is just details. I am raising my daughter alone. Her name is Grace, and she is 6 years old, and she is the reason I get up in the afternoon and go to work every night. Her mother, my wife, Sarah, died of cancer when Grace was 3. Sarah was a nurse too. That's how we met, on this very ward. 2 young people taking care of dying and recovering children together, falling in love in the hardest and most beautiful place there is. And when Sarah got sick herself, I took care of her, the way she'd taught me to take care of everyone. And near the end, she made me promise her something. She said, "Ben, don't you dare let this make you hard. Don't let losing me turn you into a man who protects himself by not caring. Keep staying. For Grace, and for those kids on the ward. Promise me, you'll keep being the one who stays." And I promised. And I have kept that promise, even on the nights it nearly killed me too. Hold on to that promise. It's the whole spine of everything that happened. Now let me tell you about the little boy who brought her into my life. Because I met the billionaire because of her son, long before I ever knew she was a billionaire. His name was Leo. He was 5 years old, and he came onto my ward with a serious illness, the kind that means long stays and hard treatments, and a lot of frightening nights. And from the first night, I could see that Leo was one of the scared ones. Not scared of the illness, he was too young to understand that. scared of the dark and the strange beeping machines, and being alone in a hospital bed far from home. And I did with Leo what I do with all the scared ones. I stayed. I sat with him on the bad nights. I told him terrible jokes. I taught him a secret handshake. When he had to have a frightening procedure, I held his hand through it and did not let go, and did not flinch, and I told him he was the bravest person on the whole floor, which was true. And slowly, the way it happens, Leo decided I was his. On the nights I worked, he wouldn't settle until I'd done our handshake and checked under his bed for monsters, a thing I performed with complete professional seriousness. He was, without either of us planning it, my boy on that ward. His mother was there a great deal, and I liked her, though at first I had no idea who she was. She was there more than most parents managed, sitting by Leo's bed at all hours, working on a laptop in the dim light, holding herself together with the particular white-knuckled control of a person, keeping their terror on a very short leash. Her name was Diana. She was polite to me, grateful, a little guarded, the way frightened parents often are. It was weeks before I understood, from something a colleague said, that the woman sitting by Leo's bed in a plain sweater at 3 a.m. was Diana Vale, who ran one of the largest companies in the country, whose wealth was the kind that gets written about. You would never have known it, watching her be just a scared mother in a hard plastic hospital chair. To me, she was only Leo's mom, and Leo was only my brave boy, and that, I think, is exactly why what happened later happened at all, because I knew them both as people first, long before money entered into any of it. Leo got better. Slowly, over weeks, the treatments worked, and the color came back into him, and the day finally came when he was well enough to go home, and I did our secret handshake one last time, and told him he never had to come back to see me if he didn't want to, and he informed me, gravely, that he would be coming back to visit whether I liked it or not, and I said I'd like it very much. And I thought that was the end of it. A boy got better and went home, which is the best possible ending on my ward, the one we don't always get. But a few weeks later, Diana Vale came back. Not for Leo, for me. She found me on the ward at the end of my shift, and she asked, in a voice stretched thin with something I couldn't name, if I would sit with her for a few minutes when I got off. In the cafeteria, she needed to talk to me about something, and she didn't know who else to ask. So at 2 a.m, in the empty hospital cafeteria, with the vending machines humming and the whole world asleep, Diana Vale told me why she'd come. Leo's father, she said, was not in the picture, and had not been for years, by his own choice. He had walked out when Leo was a baby, and had shown no interest since. But now, Diana explained, her voice tight, everything had changed. Because when Leo got sick, the news of it, and of Diana's fortune, had reached the father, and he had come back, not for Leo, for what having Leo could get him. He had filed for custody, and his lawyers were building a case, and the case was cruel and clever. They were painting Diana as an absent workaholic, a mother who was never home, who had left her sick child to be raised by nannies, and, the lawyers pointed out, by hospital staff. A woman married to her company and incapable of providing a real, stable, present family home. And the father, who had a new wife now and a comfortable house, and all the appearance of stability, was arguing that Leo belonged with a real family, 2 parents, a proper home, not with a billionaire who was never there. The hearing is in 1 month, Diana said, and her hands were shaking around the cold coffee. And my lawyers tell me it could genuinely go either way, that the optics are bad. A single mother, no matter how rich, who works 18-hour days, against a father presenting a whole stable 2-parent household. Her voice cracked, and this powerful, controlled woman looked, for a moment, like she might simply fall apart on the cafeteria table. They could take my son, A court could actually give my son to the man who abandoned him and only wants him for the money, because that man can show a marriage and a home, and I can't. I could lose Leo, and I would rather die. I didn't understand yet why she was telling me. And then she told me, "You're the most stable, present, decent person I have watched in the worst month of my life," she said. "I have sat on that ward and watched you stay with my son, when I couldn't, be the calm when I was falling apart, hold his hand and not flinch. My son loves you. He talks about you constantly. You're a single father yourself, with a little girl, so you understand children, and the court would see that, and you have no reason on earth to want anything from me except—" She stopped and forced herself to say it. "I am asking you to marry me. On paper, a real, legal marriage, entered into before the hearing, so that I can show the court a stable, two-parent home, with a man who is the most trusted presence in Leo's life. We would share a residence for appearances. Separate lives, entirely. You keep your job, your daughter, your world. And once the custody is secured, once Leo is safe, we dissolve it quietly, and you walk away, and I will make sure you and your daughter never want for anything again. It's a transaction. I know how it sounds, but it's the only card I have left, and I am begging you to let me play it." And then she named a number. I'm not going to tell you the number, but it was the kind that would have paid off my house and put Grace through any college in the country, and meant I never lay awake again, doing the math of a nurse's salary against a child's whole future. And I sat there in that empty cafeteria at 2 in the morning, and I want to tell you what actually went through me, because it wasn't the money. I thought about Leo, my brave boy, who did the secret handshake, who I'd held through the worst nights of his short life. I thought about that man, the father, who had abandoned a baby and come back, only when that baby turned out to be worth something, trying to take him not out of love but out of greed. And I thought about Sarah, and the promise I'd made her, to keep being the one who stays. And I looked at this terrified mother, who had spent a fortune and called in every resource she had, and still had been reduced to begging a night shift nurse in a cafeteria, because none of the money could buy the one thing the court wanted to see, which was someone real who would actually be there. But I also thought about the promise, and about being real, and about the fact that I have spent my whole life refusing to fake the one thing I'm good at, which is staying. And I could not, in good conscience, take a fortune to fake a family, even for a good reason. It went against the deepest thing in me. So I did not say yes to the money, and I did not say no to her. I said something else. "I'll help you keep Leo," I said. "I'll marry you, if that's what it takes to keep that boy away from a man who only wants him for money, but not for the money. I don't want your number. Take it off the table." Diana blinked, thrown completely off her script. "I don't understand. Everyone wants the number." "I'm sure they do," I said. "But I've spent my whole life being the person who's actually there. For real. Not the person who performs it for pay. And I made a promise to my late wife that I'd never let myself get hard. Never stop really caring. Never fake it. If I take a fortune to pretend to be Leo's family, I'm faking the one thing I've never faked. I won't do that. Not even to help you. So here's the deal. I'll do it, but not as a transaction. If I'm going to stand up in a courtroom and tell a judge I'm part of that little boy's family, then I'm not going to be lying. I'm actually going to be part of that little boy's family, for real, for as long as he needs me. No money, no pretending, the real thing or nothing." Diana Vale stared at me like I'd started speaking a language she'd heard of but never learned. "You want to actually," she couldn't finish. "I want it to be true," I said. "Whatever we tell that judge, I want it to be true, so that neither one of us is lying, and so that Leo never grows up and finds out the family that saved him was a lie somebody bought. If I do this, I do it real, That's my only condition, and it's not negotiable." Continued in the next part. Diana agreed. I don't think she fully understood what she was agreeing to. I think she thought, "Make it real," was just my strange condition, a scruple to get past, and that in practice, it would still be two strangers sharing a roof for a month. She had no idea that I meant it all the way down. Neither did I, really, not yet. We married quietly, at a courthouse, with 2 witnesses, the least romantic thing you have ever seen. 2 people signing papers to save a little boy. And then, because I had insisted the marriage be real in the ways that mattered, Grace and I moved into Diana's home for the month. And something happened that none of the lawyers had planned for. 2 children found each other. My Grace was 6. Leo was 5. And from the first afternoon, when Grace walked into that enormous house dragging her ratty stuffed rabbit and marched up to Leo and asked him if he wanted to see her loose tooth, the 2 of them became inseparable in the fast, total way that only small children can. Grace had lost her mother. Leo had nearly lost his own life. They were both, in their own ways, kids who'd stared at something too big for them, and they recognized each other, and they became, within days, something like brother and sister. And I watched Diana Vale watch her son laugh and play and be an ordinary happy child with a sister for the first time in his life, and I saw something in her face begin to come loose. And here is the thing I did, that I'd promised I would. I didn't fake it. I was actually there. I came home from my night shifts and made the kids breakfast. I did homework at the kitchen table with Grace, while Leo colored beside her. I did the bedtime routine. Both kids. The stories, and the monster checks, and the secret handshakes, because I had told Diana I would be real, and I meant it. I was, for that month, actually a father to 2 children in that house, and Diana, who had spent Leo's whole life being pulled away by her company, started, without quite meaning to come home earlier, to be there for the breakfasts, to learn the bedtime routine herself, badly at first, taking instruction from a 6-year-old on the correct way to check for monsters. And the woman who believed everything was a transaction started, slowly, to thaw. Because you cannot stay frozen in a house full of children who are becoming a family in front of you. Grace cracked her open the same way she cracks everyone open, by climbing into her lap uninvited one evening and falling asleep there, and Diana sat frozen with a sleeping child on her, this woman who ran an empire, not knowing what to do, and then slowly putting her arms around my daughter and holding her, and looking at me across the room with an expression I did not have a name for yet. It was late one night, both kids asleep, that I finally understood the depth of what Diana carried. We were sitting in her kitchen, and she told me about Leo's father, the real story, not the legal one, how he'd left, how alone she'd been, how she'd poured herself into the company, partly because it was the one thing that couldn't abandon her, the one thing that responded to her effort with reliable reward, unlike the people in her life, and how terrified she was, underneath all the money and the control, that she was actually the bad mother the lawyers said she was, that maybe she really had chosen the company over her son without meaning to, that maybe she didn't deserve to keep him. "You've been here a month," she said, not looking at me, "and I've watched you be the kind of parent I've always been too scared and too busy to be. Just present, just there. And I keep thinking, what if the court is right? What if he really is better off with a real family?" And I said the truest thing I knew. "Diana, look at me. A real family isn't 2 parents and a nice house. I've sat with 100 families on that ward. I've seen kids from perfect-looking 2-parent homes who were more alone than any orphan. And I've seen single parents love their kids so hard it lit up the whole floor. A real family is just the people who stay. That's the entire definition. The people who don't leave when it gets hard. Leo's father left. You stayed. You sat in a plastic chair on my ward for a month straight while your son was sick, working off a laptop at 3 in the morning, so you wouldn't fall behind, and so you could still be there. That's not a bad mother. That is the whole definition of a good one. You're not learning to be Leo's family this month. You always were. You just never let yourself believe a person who works as hard as you do could also be enough. Diana Vale put her face in her hands and cried, and I let her, because some things you have to let a person feel all the way through. Now, the custody hearing came, and I want to tell you about that morning, because it is the morning everything turned. We stood outside the courtroom, Diana and I, dressed for court, both of us knowing that in a few minutes we would go in and I would testify, truthfully now, that I was part of Leo's family, that our home was real and stable and full of love, because it was, because I'd made sure of it. Everything was in place. We were going to win. The lawyers were confident now, with the marriage and the home, and Leo visibly thriving, and a nurse of my reputation ready to speak. And after we won, the plan, the original plan, the transaction, said that we would quietly dissolve everything, and I would go back to my old life, and Diana would keep her son, and we would both walk away. And standing in that hallway, waiting for the doors to open, Diana reached over and took my hand. To steady herself, I thought, and I held hers back, because that's what you do for someone about to walk into the fight of their life. We won. It wasn't close, in the end. The judge saw exactly what was real. She saw a father who had abandoned a baby and returned only when that baby became valuable, and she saw a mother who had never left, and a home full of 2 children who had become a family, and she ruled, and Leo was safe, and the man who'd only wanted him for money walked out of that courtroom with nothing, which was exactly what he'd given his son. And in the hallway afterward, in the flood of relief, the lawyers shaking hands, Leo running to hug his mother's legs, the moment came when it was over, truly over, when the transaction was complete, and the plan said we should begin the quiet business of dissolving it all and going our separate ways. And Diana was still holding my hand, and when I gently started to let go, because the job was done and the plan was the plan, she didn't let go back. Her grip tightened, and I looked at her, and she was looking at me with tears streaming down her face, and she said, in a voice I had never heard from her, low and shaking, and completely stripped of all its armor, "I can't, Ben. I can't let go. I can't do it. The plan says you leave now, and I can't. I can't take Grace out of Leo's life, and I can't take you out of mine, and I have been lying awake every night this month knowing this day was coming, and dreading it more than I dreaded losing the case. And I don't know how to say this because I've never once in my life said it to anyone, but I don't want the transaction. I don't want you to vanish. I want—" And she stopped, because the words were ones she had never let herself say. And here is where I did the thing I think is the truest thing I have ever done. I did not just say yes, even though every part of me wanted to, because I had made a promise, a long time ago, to be real and never fake. And that promise cut both ways. It meant I couldn't fake a family, and it also meant I couldn't let this be real, for the wrong reasons. I took her other hand, so I was holding both, and I said, "Diana, listen to me. We won. Leo's safe. The case is over. Which means right now, this second, you don't need me anymore. Not for the court, not for the custody, not for anything. You are completely free. The transaction is done, and you owe me nothing, and I could walk out that door, and you'd keep Leo, and lose nothing. So I need you to hear what I'm about to ask, because it matters more than anything. Do you want me to stay because you're scared of the quiet house? Because a month of a real family made the old lonely life unbearable to go back to? Or do you want me to stay because you want me, and Grace, as your actual family, freely, chosen, with nothing forcing your hand?" She looked at me. "What's the difference?" The difference is everything, I said. One of them falls apart in a year, when the fear wears off. The other one lasts. And I have 2 children counting on me not to build them a family out of fear, because I know what it does to a kid to be part of a family that was assembled to solve a problem, and then comes apart when the problem's gone. So I'm not going to answer the fear. I'll only answer the true thing. Go home tonight, without me. Sleep in your house, free and clear, custody won, nobody's asset, nobody's transaction. And if in the morning, or next week, or next month, you still want us, not because you're scared, but because you choose it, then come and find me, and say the true thing, and I promise you, I will never let go of your hand again, as long as I live. But you have to choose it free. Both of us do. Or it isn't real, and I won't give my daughter or your son anything that isn't real. It was the hardest thing I have ever said, because I did not want to let go of her hand in that hallway any more than she wanted to let go of mine. But I did. I let go, and I gathered grace, and I went home to my old small apartment that night, and I did not know if she would come. She came. Not the next morning. She made herself wait, made herself be sure. But a week later, she came to my apartment, without lawyers, without a plan, without a single strategic bone in her body, holding Leo's hand and a bag of groceries, because she'd decided she was going to learn to cook a real dinner in my tiny kitchen, badly, because she was a fast learner. And Leo saw Grace and ran to her, and Diana looked at me across my small living room and said, "I'm not scared of the quiet house anymore." I checked. I lived in it for a week, and every single night, I only wanted one thing, and it wasn't quiet. It was you, all of you. Not because I need a family for a judge, because I finally have one, and I'm not letting it go. That's the true thing. Please, let me stay. So we stayed, together, for real. Now I told you this is not a fairy tale, so here's the true part. We did it slow, the right way. We didn't pretend a courthouse transaction had been a love story. We started over. Honestly, 2 guarded and grieving parents, and 2 children who'd already decided they were siblings, and we built it one real day at a time. We married again, a long while later, a true one, in a backyard, with Leo and Grace standing up front holding hands, having appointed themselves co-ring bearers and refusing all argument on the matter. And I never took $1 of Diana's money for that month, not one, and I never will live off her fortune, because the whole point, the entire spine of the thing, was that I would not be bought, that the family was real, precisely because no money ever changed hands to make it. I kept my job on the night shift. I still work it. Diana fought me on that, hard, and I won, which she says has never happened to anyone else who tried to give her money. And I think she let me win, because my refusing was the one thing that proved, all the way down, that I had never once been in it for the number. I stay on that ward because those sick, scared kids in the dark need someone who stays, and staying is the one thing I have ever truly been good at, and I am not going to stop being good at it just because I married someone who could buy the hospital. There's a version of that month where I take the number, where I marry Diana for the fortune, help her win, cash the check, and vanish, and maybe it even works out fine. And there is no version of that, where I do that, and also get to look my daughter and my son in the eye someday, and tell them the truth straight, that the family that saved everyone was never bought, never faked, but real, from the very first night. I picked the real thing. I'd pick it every single time. Leo calls me Dad now. He asked if he could, one night, shyly, during our secret handshake, and I had to leave the room for a minute, before I could come back and tell him nothing in my whole life had ever made me prouder. And Grace has a mother again, one who learned to check for monsters, who has never once treated my girl as anything less than completely her own. 2 kids who each lost something too big for them, and found, in the strangest way, through a transaction that refused to stay a transaction, a whole family on the other side of it. So let me leave you with this tonight. A court was about to decide that a real family means 2 parents and a nice house, and a woman with all the money in the world couldn't buy the one thing that would prove them wrong, because the thing that makes a family real was never for sale. It's just the people who stay, the ones who don't leave when it's hard. And it turned out the man who could give her that was the one she'd found in the dark on a hospital ward, the night shift nurse, whose whole and only gift was that he stays. So, here is what I honestly want to know from you tonight. Who is the person in your life who stayed? Not the one who looked good on paper, not the one who was supposed to be there, but the one who actually was, in the dark, when it was hard, asking for nothing? That's your real family, whatever the paperwork says. And have you ever told them that you know it, that you saw them staying, that it meant everything? Tell me about the person who stayed, down in the comments. I read every single one, and tonight yours is the one I most want to read. And if this story reached you, if you believe, like I've come to believe, that a real family is simply the people who refuse to leave, then do me one small favor before you go. Subscribe so the next story finds you too. Leave a like so one more person who's been quietly staying for someone gets to feel seen tonight. And go tell the person who stayed for you that you noticed. I'll be right here, reading every word.